In the last 6 months, I've talked to over 500 JavaScript engineers, from junior to senior to lead. I've also personally mentored hundreds of them at the senior dev together with my brother Bogdan. Our mentees are landing 6-figure offers at a time where most developers struggle to get interviews in the first place. In this video, I'm breaking down 8 harsh truths of what's actually going on in software engineering right now. From how AI is drastically changing coding, technical interviews, and the job market. And more importantly, what can you do today to stay employable, valuable, and in demand as a software engineer? Number 1, the only stack, it's full stack. As this developer on Reddit observed, we are witnessing the death of specialization. Basically, he says that originally they had people with different specialization, front-end developers, back-end developers, database engineers, but that now all those roles are now a single title, which is probably full stack engineer, and the developer is expected to do all of them. This is not something unique. This is something we've seen happening in the market worldwide, where companies are demanding full stack skills no matter your specialization. For example, this is a front-end engineering positions in California, and they are asking for experience integrating UI implementations with RESTful APIs. So they're asking for more back-end experience and experience with Docker, CI/CD pipelines, and Git source control, meaning they are actually looking for a front-end developer who can do full stack. So my advice to front-end or back-end only devs, which is actually most devs, it's aim to go full stack, build full stack skills on top of your specialization. Now, as a senior dev in the last few months, we've seen dozens of front-end engineers and back-end engineers going through this transition. And one tip I can give you, it's don't go too far from what you know already. You see front-end engineers, they try to go full stack and they jump into things like Docker and Terraform and Kubernetes, when instead you should look for things that are a bit closer to the front end where your front end knowledge is still useful. Now, if you want to learn more about the specific concepts you should master, if, for example, you're a front engineer who wants to go full stack, then check the other video that Bogdan and I did about it. Harsh truth number 2, the senior-only market, it's here to stay. If you go to LinkedIn and you make a quick job search, you look for something like front-end developer positions, you see all the top positions that are popping up in the search are usually senior or staff engineer. And if you scroll down in the search, you'll see that it's dozens of them, and that most positions are actually asking for seniors or staff engineers, which is pretty crazy because most developers in the market are not staff and some of them are senior. Most people are somewhere at the mid or junior level. And I really wanted to dig into the numbers. So I applied a filter, which is, hey, just show me mid to senior level positions. And even if you do that, you'll see most of them in the title have senior/staff. But what was surprising was that we've got about 1,646 results, which is quite a lot. What's even more surprising is that if you change your filter and you say, hey, just show me entry level, which I guess for LinkedIn entry level, it's about like 0 to probably 3 years experience, maybe these days 5 years experience. Anyway, you see there's like 257 results. So there are about 6 to 7 times less entry positions than senior positions. And part of that you can blame on AI. This is actually a study that came up a few days ago, actually October 13, where they analyzed, if I read correctly, about 62 million workers across 285,000 firms in the US. And they realized that AI adoption, it's associated with a sharp decline in junior employment among adopting firms relative to non-adopters, while senior employment remains largely unchanged, meaning senior dev market is still doing great, but juniors got crushed, which is something that most developers we talk to and work with actually are telling us about, and brings me to the number 1 advice that we give to junior and mid-level devs, which is get to senior as fast as you can. It doesn't have to be by working with someone like us. I think we can help you get there much faster, but make that your number 1 goal if you want to stay competitive in this market. Also, if you want to learn more, Bogdan and I are constantly making videos about this. Check out our channel for specific concepts you need to master for you to make that jump from junior, mid-level towards the senior. And by the way, folks, if you don't know me, my name is Dragos, and together with my twin brother, Bogdan, which you see a lot on the channel as well, we co-founded the Senior Dev, where we focus on helping JavaScript-focused engineers, React, Node.js, Angular, Vue, whatever you're working with. We help you make the jump towards the senior level. If you want to know more about what we do and how we could help you, just check the link in comments. Harsh market truth number 3, AI coding sucks. but you still have to deal with it. So as soon as vibe coding became a thing, Bogdan and I digged into the numbers, digged into the performance. We used it ourselves as a senior dev on our platform, and we realized that AI coding, it's largely overestimating. What we are seeing is that, yes, AI coding is not what it claims to be from a developer perspective. Tech companies are still going to basically push it down your throat in a way. So even if AI coding is not that amazing, AI engineer positions are growing at a crazy pace. This is another search I've done on LinkedIn where I Googled for AI engineer positions. And as you can see, this is about 2,975 results. I think it's more results than the front-end search I've done, which was unthinkable a few years ago. But, and this is something that Gregory Oslo at the Pragmatic Engineer realized, that when it comes to AI engineers, there are basically two types of them: the foundational model building versus model application. And when we talk about model building, these kind of AI engineers that are building models, they are the ones that are building the LLMs themselves, and they are very close to research side. Many times they have a PhD and they have a very narrow focus. They focus on making LLMs better. And then there is another whole category of AI engineers which are more dedicated to model application and, should I say, model integration. This is one job posting that I found from that search on LinkedIn, where for an AI engineer position, they are actually asking for 2+ years of experience as a full stack engineer, and they ask you for JavaScript knowledge, they ask you for REST API knowledge, they ask you for Docker. So it's basically a full stack engineer that has some hands-on experience building with LLM. So whether you're a front-end, back-end, or full stack engineer and you want to become more employable in the current market, we advise you to learn AI, but don't obsess over it. Meaning, don't drop your front-end or back-end or full stack knowledge and just jump straight into AI. And by the way, if you want to learn more, Bogdan and I have made a video exactly about that. You can check it out in the channel. Harsh reality number 4. React, it's not killing innovation. AI garbage is. A few years ago, this article went viral about how React won by default and it's killing front-end innovation. What the author was claiming was that software engineers and particularly front engineers worked with React so much and got so used to it that whenever they are building a new app, they are not even thinking about whether, hey, is this the best framework we use? Maybe we should pick something like Vue or Svelte or etc. They're not doing that. They're just going and saying, hey, let's just use React and let's see how do we do this with React. And this is basically killing innovation. And honestly, I don't agree with that. First of all, because for God's sake, it was about time for us to have a default solution in the front end. And the fact that React is becoming this default solution where people can be like, hey, I can use React. I don't need to go to a whole cost-benefit analysis for a simple app that's been built over and over again. I believe that's a positive thing. It already brings a lot of standardization in the way we do things, in the way we build apps. And I believe React becoming more popular, it's an overall win. Now, I do agree with the author that this choice about the framework you use should never be automatic, and you should always think about it, even if it's just a bit. But what's even more interesting about this is that I don't believe React actually killed web innovation. I believe it's something else, and I bet you know who. Because if you remember the good old times, if you Google for any quality tech talk, like anything that's in depth, talking about the event loop or parsing JavaScript, all these amazing tech talks that are very focused on the fundamentals, that are still thinking about how to optimize things, are usually from 10, 8, 5, 7 years ago. And what happened ever since? Did JavaScript got infinitely better, so we don't need to talk about optimization? Did the web got incredibly better, so we don't have to care about the details as software engineers? Not really. And sadly, it's getting even worse, because if you look at the release date of major frameworks that we use now, Next.js, one of the latest to come out, and then we've got GraphQL, or even tools like Vite. If you look at the release date of these frameworks and tools, you'll be surprised that the great majority has been released before 2020. What happened then? Well, on November 30, 2022, ChatGPT has been released. And boom, the whole developer community gravitated towards that direction where it seems like every article, every tech talk, every YouTuber out there is talking about LLMs and generative AI and AI coding or whatever Sam Altman and Andrei Karpathy says. And I'm not saying that LLMs as a whole didn't have a good impact on programming or the web community as a whole. But I do feel like us diverging all our time and attention talking about this really created a gap in the innovation that's happening on the web. Which actually brings me to the next point. Code is still king. And why is code still king when everybody's thinking that developers are going to be obsolete and we won't have to write a lot of code? Well, actually, because the opposite happened, right? And as this programmer saw, live coding is becoming the norm now. And they want you to be coding live and they want to be recording when you're coding. What happened? AI increased massively the number of fake applications, fake applicants, and there's a lot of fraud going on. So one of the few ways left for companies to actually assess your skills is to see you doing it live. Code is still king because whatever take-home challenge you send to somebody, they will drop it into GPT and just let GPT do it and send you back 1,000 lines of code that you have to go to. But not only that, some people said that, hey, with AI coding, the developer will transition into more like a tech lead for AIs or an architect where basically AI does the coding and the developer makes technical decisions. And I honestly believe this statement is completely flawed. First, because as I've already mentioned, AI coding sucks. And second, because a great architect, it's first and foremost a great coder. Code is architecture. You can't really have one without the other. So as I've said previously, don't get distracted, keep on coding and keep improving your technical skills. My advice to everyone is don't be this guy that's asking how to improve my coding skills after relying too much on AI. And at the senior dev, we see a lot of software engineers doing this. Even the senior engineers are using AI so much to a point where their actual coding skills are getting worse and worse. Then something happens in a company. They need to go to the market and get a new position and interview. And that's when they realize whatever they did with AI back at their job is practically useless because companies want someone who can actually code without AI. AI is not an invitation for you to stop improving your skills and your technical knowledge. And by the way, if you want to know, hey, where should I start exactly? Or what are my gaps and what should I actually improve on? Which is probably the first question that pops in your mind when you try to do that. Bogdan and I put together this free 10 minutes technical assessment for JavaScript engineers. Invest 10 minutes into it and it will give you exactly your strengths, your weaknesses, where you stand in the market. Most importantly, what you can do to improve. Harsh reality number 6. Don't try to plan your developer career. You'll probably fail. Back in the days, you had this linear progression, right? You would learn how to code, get to junior dev, then probably mid, then senior, and etc. Maybe principal, maybe staff, maybe you would go into engineering management. But the market is a lot more messy these days. There's so much uncertainty. You can get a job in 3 months. You're again looking for another job. You can get a freelance project in between and then you go back to full employment. You can't really plan. There's just too much random stuff happening and so many things outside your control that I feel like trying to plan your developer career in this environment, it's setting yourself up for failure. Because these days, what really happens is, you might start as a junior. Maybe you find a position. Maybe you don't. Maybe you go freelancing a bit. Maybe you get the opportunity to be a technical co-founder, which I wouldn't advise someone at junior or mid-level to do. Or maybe whatever. There is no script. You cannot have a linear career progression. It's very challenging to have this kind of linear, uniform career progression in this environment. And my advice here is just to kind of surrender to the chaos and just be a bit flexible. This doesn't mean you should jump from place to place and opportunity to opportunity. You should have a strategy, but don't expect something linear. Don't expect things to fit on a piece of paper and have an amazing resume. Because in the end, in this market, your offer might get canceled. You might get fired even after a few months of doing an amazing job. The company you work for might shut down completely tomorrow and you have to go back to the job market. You never really know. But trust me, you will be fine. And this is something that being a senior gives you, which is you've been in these situations before. You had friends who got fired, then they found another job. Then even yourself, maybe your project was shut down, you had to go back into the market, but you have this experience and that gives you confidence. And that confidence helps you not to panic when you get laid off and be like, hey, you know what? Time for a new chapter. Again, my tip here would be for you to stay flexible. And remember, it doesn't really matter if your project is 3 years or 3 months or 3 weeks. You can learn something from everything and you can make the best of it. Which actually brings me to the next point, because there is a limit on how flexible you should actually be. Harsh reality number 7, your tech stack matters more than you think. So if you've been around, you probably heard this advice before that in software engineering, there are like 15 patterns that keep repeating themselves. And if you master those patterns, you are done, because it will be very easy for you to pick up another framework, another tech stack, etc. And honestly, I stand by this advice. I believe mastering these repeating patterns and mental models, it's probably one of the best, fastest, and only way for you to get to senior. This is actually what senior devs do. But there's a catch. How well you implement these 15 repeating patterns depends on your understanding of the framework, platform, and environment you're in. So it's 50-50. 50% of your software engineering knowledge, it's fundamentals and mental models that are framework agnostic. And the other 50%, it's very implementation focused. So for example, things like object-oriented programming or functional programming, these are fundamentals that you can apply in different languages, different environments, etc. But if you're a JavaScript engineer and you work with something like React or Node, it will be tough for you to be productive if you only know these kind of framework agnostic concepts and you don't have an understanding of how JavaScript actually works. And of course, the browser. Because as you can see here, when we are trying to implement something like a in-memory cache in both JavaScript and Java, the implementation, the code itself can be quite different, even if the design and the principles behind it are very similar. Lord have mercy for the Java developers out there, because this file was like 100 lines. Anyway, moving on to harsh reality number 8, burnout and not AI, it's your greatest enemy. Funny enough, a few days ago, I was checking which article on our blog at the Senior Dev was the most read in the last 12 months. And I was surprised, because we've got a lot of stuff out there. We talk about senior concepts, we talk about senior front-end roadmaps and back-end roadmaps. But the article that got the most visit was actually this one. To every developer close to burnout, read this. And the fact that the market being difficult means a lot of software developers have to stay in jobs they don't like. They have to put up with longer hours. They have to put up with stuff they don't like. Then it makes sense that a lot of developers are actually burnt out. What's worse, and I remember back a few years ago, is that developers don't pay a lot of attention to burnout until they are burnt out. And when they are burnt out, they don't blame it on the job or on the hours. They think, hey, maybe I'm not made for this job. Maybe it's not for me. I have some other colleagues who are putting up with all this stuff and they don't really complain about it. And I truly believe this is the worst way you can think about it, because you're just kind of putting a lot of shame on yourself and not really thinking about the problem. When in fact, and I've checked different studies, it's hard to come up with an exact number, but about 70% of developers suffer from burnout. Some of them are critically burnt out. Others are kind of just exhausted, just tired, just sick of it. But, they have to pay bills, so they just keep coming. And I honestly believe this is a pity. In the last few years, Bogdan and I saw many talented developers who left the industry, just realized a few years after that they're actually missing it. I don't want this to happen to you. So let's understand first why burnout happened and then how you can actually fix it. Developer burnout happens because, first of all, a lot of developers have to work overtime, which is more and more common. Managers, they want to hit their numbers and they're just pushing people, especially when they know the market is tough and people don't have a lot of choices, which is actually very sad, because that person will leave you as soon as they have an opportunity, and it's a bigger loss for the company. But what can you do about it? Then there are, of course, unclear requirements. Hey, just code it. Just make it happen. Code what? And also, of course, the project scope just keeps going and growing. We just keep adding features, and we never release, or when we release, there's a lot of bugs going on and the work is never done. I live to this, and it can get you burned out very, very fast. Then there's too much stuff going on, frameworks, AI, learn this, learn that. There's so much anxiety, so much pressure. It feels like it's never enough. Of course, people get burned out. Job market instability. doesn't help, then AI, it's adding even more noise and increasing expectations, not productivity, because you have all these tech companies who are pushing these AI tools saying, no, this will make you developers 20, 30, 50% more productive. Then developers are using the AI tools. They might be maybe a 3, 5% productivity increase. But now the managers have to justify everything, all the investment they've done in those AI tools, right? So they are pushing developers actually. Finally, because of all this, a lot of software engineers put all their time and energy into their job. And when they get home, they have nothing else going on besides their job. Their whole identity is tied to their job and their happiness. They may have 1 or 2 friends. They don't have a lot of hobbies besides maybe video gaming, which is not very healthy to have, especially when you spend 8 hours a day looking at a computer. And this leads to burnout, and it leads to depression, and it leads to misery. Now, I was that developer that would, spend 10 hours a day at work, then go back, have some junk food, play video games until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., then just wake up, drink a bunch of Red Bulls, back to the office, back to coding, back home, more video games, more junk food, etc. It's a recipe for failure. The good news is that you can learn how to mitigate most of these issues. And the first point you have to not forget is to have fun. Yes, we have deadlines, we have requirements, but work has to be fun. We spend 40 hours a week there. Try to enjoy at least half of what you're doing. Also, learn how to differentiate signal versus noise. Get good at ignoring stuff. You don't need to master all the 15 frameworks that are in your inbox or AI coding tools, or you don't have to invest in NFTs and blockchain and all that crap that people are, talking about and making you feel like you're missing out on stuff all the time. You don't need that. Shut down your YouTube, shut down your email for about 3 days, and you're going to be just fine. Your life will not change. Second, learn how to manage expectations. External, that means your boss, your stakeholders, your project manager, and also internal, that means your own expectations over your own performance. Because most developers are very critical on themselves, very hard on themselves, when they actually shouldn't. Also, set boundaries. Again, say no to projects, say no to people, protect your time, improve your technical skills, both interviewing and delivery. I think there is this very good quote from Jim Rohn where he said, don't hope for things to get easier, hope for you to get better. And that's the best advice I can give you. The better you get, the easier things will be. And of course, finally, find a mentor and a community. It's a lot easier to go through these things when you are surrounded by someone who went through this and by other people who are going through the same, and realize, hey, it's not me, it's just the way it is, and I can learn, I can become better. And look at them, they went through the same, and look at where they are now. And I'm not saying you should, join our mentorship and our community. All I'm saying is if there is someone at work, if there is someone that you can get some mentorship from. It doesn't have to be every week. It can be someone that you have lunch with once a month. That's totally fine. I used to do this with a bunch of my ex-CTOs and tech leads, where I would have lunch with them once a month, and I would talk about the struggles. They would tell me how they would deal with it, how they dealt with it, etc. And it helped me a lot, and it led me to amazing friendship, and it opened so many doors in my developer career. So I advise you to do the same. And finally, change your perspective. And this is one change I wish I did a lot earlier in my developer career, where I should have changed from I have to I get to. I used to go to work and think about all this stuff. I have to learn testing, and I have to learn performance, and I need to ship this and this feature, and then I need to apply, and I need to improve my skills, and I have to do these data structures, and I have this now to learn about system design. I have so much to do and so little time, and I just, why me? Why do I need to do all this stuff? And one day I was reading this book, and the author said, hey, everything you do, you should do with passion, and you should think about how lucky you are to be in a position where you get to do all these things, where you have the opportunity to actually learn more about system design, to learn more about data structures, to learn more about what other companies are doing when you're interviewing. And this little change in mindset, the work was the same. I would go to work and do the same, but I would finally at least be able to enjoy at least, 50% of it, which was already a huge improvement. And I invite you to try the same this week. Okay, folks, this is it for today, and I'll see you in the next one.